Hello, so today we are profiling a freelance journalist called Emma Wilkinson, and excited about this because it's great that we've got a specialist sector journalist. And Emma's kind of reacted to us when we sent an email asking her, could we interview you? Because I think it's great to realise that when you want to sector your story down, it's best to connect to the right type of journalists. So Emma, thank you so much for joining us.
You're welcome.
So tell us first, if you don't mind, what sectors do you specialise in?
Okay, so I always describe myself as a freelance journalist specialising in medicine and health.
Yeah.
And I tend to write for specialist publications. Most of my work is for medical journals or trade publications that are targeting health professionals.
Brilliant. And so tell us a bit about, before we dive into ask you questions and how we can approach your work with you and what content you're looking for, what's your background? How long have you been doing this for, and how's things changed for you?
Okay, so this is where I show my age. My first degree was in biomedical science. That's how I came to have this specialism, but I realised I didn't want to do science, but I was interested in it. So I then did a journalism master's after that. Then I went to work at a medical journal, The Lancet, for a bit, and then I worked at Pulse, which is a GP magazine, and then I decided to go freelance. So I've been freelance now for about 14 years, I think. I've been freelance for a really long time. And for part of that, I was also a health reporter for BBC News Online, sort of doing part and part. So a long time.
Fantastic. So in terms of a typical kind of way that you get your stories, are the stories, do they commission you, the publications you work for, or do you pitch stories in? How does that work?
It's a bit of both. So sometimes it will be, sometimes I do new shifts, I should say. So I'm doing a shift for a day for a publication. So on that day, I might be looking for stories related to pharmacy or general practice, for example. Sometimes it's a feature idea that I've pitched to them, or a news story that I've pitched, something that I've come across. And other times they'll come to me, we're doing a big investigation on, or we want to do a feature on, and then it'll be up to me to go and find case studies or whatever it might be.
So tell us about this news shift. How does that work? And is that for online websites? Because obviously it's very reactive then, I'm guessing. So how does that work?
Yeah, so when I do news shifts, so for example, I sometimes do this for the Pharmaceutical Journal, and I sometimes do it for Pulse, which is a GP magazine, and that is very on the day thing. So I was doing that yesterday, and it was related to problems around COVID testing, for example, which were all over the news yesterday. So it would be those health stories that are kind of happening in the moment, but targeted towards the specialist audience. It would also be new medical studies that are coming out, kind of keeping across of what's coming out in the journals.
So who are you targeting on average? Is it the GPs and the medical professionals, or is it anyone in general interested from a medical point of view and a health point of view?
Yes, so that's interesting, isn't it? Because it depends. I write for Pulse and Chemist and Druggist and the Pharmaceutical Journal and the BMJ, but it's not all medics and health professionals that read those publications. And what's in those publications then it gets looked at by all the health journalists across the mainstream media as well. So, and then gets picked up and kind of that way.
So to have your story published with what you write about, do you have to be in that profession yourself and recognised? Or could there be like holistic approach, or just people in general talking about a story? Like you're saying, you need stories. So I'm just trying to think your sources and who writes the what you're writing about. Really, is it mostly just industry kind of stuff?
Quite a lot of it is, but we often I will need case studies as well. So the BMJ, for example, recently I've done a few pieces for them where they've been very, very keen to get the patient view in there, to get a case study. So I was writing something about how mental health teams were managing with lockdown under coronavirus, how they'd kind of adapted, and a PR spotted what I'd been doing on social media and got in touch with me with relation to an app that they were trialing in Portsmouth.
Yeah.
That kind of helped these connections. So you do need to bring in kind of more general case studies, more general kind of patient experience as well. It's not all about, medical information for doctors all the time.
Brilliant. So connecting to you, I suppose it's good for you to have a bank of case studies. So how do you currently find your sources? Can people connect to you and send you what they do? And then would you keep them on file, or do you put like a media request out when you need somebody? How does it work?
Yeah, so if I need to find a story, Facebook usually is
Okay.
the place. I'm kind of have lots of groups on there that I tap into, or social media in general. Sometimes you can use charities and that sort of thing if it's patient experience that you need. Recently I was trying to find patients who had to rely on their pharmacist during lockdown because other parts of the NHS were closed, because that's a bit of a story that I've been telling for pharmacy, but I thought I could do this more generally for mainstream media. There's a story here. So usually it's calls out onto social media. If anybody did have what they think was an interesting kind of case study from a medical point of view, if I couldn't use it at that time, or it wasn't something I happened to be working on, I would kind of file it away just in case.
Brilliant, because it does work, doesn't it? Because you never know what's going to pop up, or if you look to fill a story, and sometimes stories brew in your head, really, don't they? You know, you think, oh, actually, that could be worthwhile writing. And I suppose as the news angles change, it's just going with something that comes up that's topical at the time. So what do you look for if, let's say, someone approached you, maybe they were a medical professional, they were maybe a coach from a mental health team, or they went in to coach the nurses, or I don't know, how would they approach you with an angle of a story? Would it be to pitch a story in? Would it be to just pitch their expertise? How would you like people to approach you? What's the best thing to do?
Yeah, usually it's about introducing themselves and what they do, but it's always interesting to hear if they've got new projects going on and things that they're doing, especially if it's something innovative that's happening in the NHS, within an NHS type environment. And I'm including pharmacy in that, community pharmacy as well, because those can make good stories if people are kind of trying a new way of working, or new bits of technology, for example. That's always something that, even if it's not a story in itself, could attach to another piece that you were doing.
So they're not necessarily having to write the press release to you, just kind of what they do in their expertise, and a kind of an angle that you might be interested in.
Yes. And the key is to get straight to the point of the new bit that you've done. But I don't need you to write me a press release. That's fine.
And we talk about this all the time. In fact, we've got literally in one of our PR Hour Live training next week, we're having to sum up a story in a sentence, because I think it's the biggest frustration with journalists. You haven't got the time. You want to just get to the essence of it, don't you, straight away?
Yeah.
So for you, I suppose you can sum up a story just through the headline, can't you, really, to see if it's going to be of interest to you?
Yes, and I do appreciate that is a bit of a skill. But yes, you know, I'm less likely to pay attention to anything you send me if it's pages and pages of lengthy waffle that starts at the beginning of Once Upon a Time and doesn't actually get to the new thing that you're doing.
Yeah, we did a Meet the Journalists event recently, and we had 5 journalists sitting on this stage, and they were brutal with everybody in the audience, because everyone was doing this Once Upon a Time, and I did this and this and this, and then they went all the way to the end and said, we just wanted the end bit, the end 30 seconds, which is what we wanted. So often you starting, with the end result first, isn't it? Which is the hook of the story.
Yes, and if I'm interested, if there's a way that I can use it, I can come back to you to find out all the background information anyway.
Yeah. So how does it work from a freelancer point of view, if you don't mind sharing? Do you get commissioned and you get paid to write the articles? So if they approach you, they're not going to have to pay you for the work. It's a win-win scenario, isn't it? Because they're giving you content, and then you're getting, your connection, and your deal is with the media outlets. Is that how it works?
Yeah, so I get paid for doing the work. most of the publications that I write for, because I'm not kind of writing for nationals with big budgets, generally are not paying for case studies. But this is about you having the opportunity to promote something new that you're doing, or a bit of work that you wanted to kind of share more widely among medical professionals. I wouldn't expect you to provide me with content. If I needed to know more from you, that would come from an interview, you know, at a time that we could both agree would work. So, you know, I wouldn't. This week, weirdly, I've had 2 people send me kind of finished articles saying, I just wondered if you'd be interested in this. Well, I'm the freelance journalist. I'm not, you know, what do you think I'm going to do with that? That's not, you know, my job is to agree with an editor what an article, and that conversation is a negotiation as well, because when I pitch them, I'm literally pitching a couple of paragraphs, and then they would come to me, and between us we decide what that article would look like. So there's no point sending me kind of a finished because at that point you don't know what the editor wants.
And that's a great point, you know, with freelancers, that you're kind of working together, aren't you? Because they want the story, because they get commissioned for the story, and they want to work with you. And almost, if you know you've got the story, you're helping them, aren't you? You know, pitching it in for them, rather than, say, like them having to write the final story. That's what you do. That's your job.
Yeah. So sometimes it's because it might be a patient or somebody who wants to raise awareness of an issue, of something that didn't go well or did go well, you know, because, you know, there was a new way of providing care that worked really well for them, whatever it might be. And that would usually sit within a bigger piece. So there's no point sending me your whole case study anyway, just, you know, a couple of sentences on your experience.
Perfect. And that's music to most people's ears, because they sometimes struggle with actually writing the press release. Some people are brilliant at it, but you'll craft the story however you want it to the audience, won't you? Which is there any tips before we wrap up of what not to do? I know you said don't waffle, get to the point, which is nearly what everybody says, which is perfect advice, because, you know, when we're passionate about a story, we just want to get it all out and tell you everything. Any other tips that you can give to us that will help us approach freelance journalists, or even yourself in general?
Yeah, so bear in mind that I can't guarantee a commission either. Just because I've got good working relationships with these editors doesn't mean that something is definitely going to happen. You might end up only having kind of a small sentence or a small part of the story, because it's part of a wider piece, which is, again, something that isn't in my control. But I would always be honest with you about where this was going to be used and who I was approaching with a story, and what the final, you know, type of article was going to be. But yeah, I think sometimes there's a bit of lack of understanding about kind of how that relationship works between the freelance and the editor, and how much control I have over whether things get picked up or not. And
nothing, like you say, nothing's guaranteed, is it? You know, it's a great relationship to build with someone like yourself, because I would imagine as well, sometimes you revisit people, you'll go back and use them again for quotes or for further stories, or to maybe do a follow-up to see how things have advanced or changed.
Yeah, absolutely.
So definitely worthwhile. So brilliant. So thank you. So if anybody wanted to connect with you, what is it you may be looking for in the future? Is it some expertise, like you say, what's coming up, and what's your preference of them to contact you? Is it by email, by telephone? How is it?
Definitely by email, but if you go to my website, which is emmawilkinson.net, there's all the information on there about how to contact me, and you can also take a look at articles that I've done to kind of give you a sense as well of the type.
And I think that's a great point, isn't it? And we always mention that whoever you're going to work with, it's good to just spend a bit of time to see what they've written, see the style of their writing, who they write for, and kind of match your story to make sure your audience fits. So for some people, you know, watching this, you've got to make sure that working with yourself, that, you know, you are reaching their potential customers and clients, or it's going to give them some sort of profile raise, because it's got to be a win-win on both sides. So yeah, spend a bit of time, have a look at Emma's website. So it's emmawilkinson.net. and I'll put the links in everything as well. So that's fantastic. Emma, thank you so much for joining us. It's great to profile you as a freelance journalist, and it's nice when it's so specialist and niche. So have a look at Emma's website. If you want to connect with her, send her your details, and we look forward to seeing you all soon. And Emma, thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you.